It always comes full circle, doesn't it? J.D. Vance wrapping up his vice presidential nominating speech last night and walking off the stage to that very song that Bill Clinton used back in 1992. And the similarities to me are somewhat striking when you think about it. Here's J.D. Vance, a young man, a fresh face, a likely future face of the Republican Party, in a party and, frankly, a political climate right now that desperately needs it. The first millennial on a ticket, signaling that America's best days are still ahead of herself. Something that you, frankly, have not heard a lot of from Joe Biden and even Donald Trump. What has been one of the big complaints for many of us about the Trump campaign for the last several months? There were still too many instances where the message was highlighted by past grievances. J.D. Vance gave a vision of MAGA that exists beyond Donald Trump, that outlives Donald Trump. And that's what last night was all about. Now, was J.D. Vance the most polished speaker I've ever seen take a stage of that size, of that moment? No, he wasn't. He's 39 years old. He's got me by a couple of years, but still, you put a guy at that age on that stage, is he going to be the most polished? Probably not. But that's okay. His message is what mattered. And his message, his story, as a young man who grew up in, some of the poorest parts of our country, truly defines the forgotten man and forgotten woman that Donald Trump has been speaking to for the last 8 years, that he has made the backbone of his political movement. That is J.D. Vance. It's a kid who grew up and being raised by his grandparents. His mother was an addict. Nobody in his family, frankly, lived all that long, had any kind of education, any kind of real traditional success. He ends up joining the Marines, a couple of years in Iraq, comes back, goes to Ohio State, ends up getting into Yale Law School, meets his future wife there. They have 3 beautiful children. She introduced him. And now here he is living the American dream and potentially on his way to being the next vice president of the United States. The story works. The story resonates. It looks Americana. And when you hear him tell this story personally, there was a very human element to last night's Republican National Convention. Whether it was Donald Trump's granddaughter talking about her grandpa, or whether it was J.D. Vance last night in his speech talking about his own mother, who's now been sober 10 years.
Our movement is about single moms like mine who struggled with money and addiction but never gave up. And I'm proud to say that tonight my mom is here, 10 years clean and sober. I love you, Mom.
And by the way, as I'm looking at J.D. Vance's mother, I'm thinking Amy Adams was actually the perfect choice for her. If Amy Adams was a lifelong addict and 30 years older, she would look like J.D. Vance's mother. Literally, it was stunning. I was like, wow, Amy Adams was like the perfect choice for that role. But in all seriousness, no one thinks of these speeches and is like, wow, I remember that great speech that a VP nominee made at fill-in-the-blank convention. I can't really think of one. Now, some people, we talked about it yesterday, Ronald Reagan's 1976 convention speech here in Kansas City that kind of led him to being the nominee in 1980. We touched on that briefly yesterday. Some people made comparisons with Ron DeSantis this week. Maybe that was his Ronald Reagan 76 moment. But even that, do you remember what somebody says, or do you remember how they present it and how their speech makes you feel and the emotions of said speech? That's mostly what matters in these things. Not the policies, but the story, how it makes you feel, what it makes you think about, the emotions behind it. And from that perspective, J.D. Vance hit a home run. And I say that as somebody who did not have J.D. Vance at the top of my list. I mean, I said it all week long. I said, if I had my druthers, I'd love somebody with that governing experience, that business experience, whether it was a Glenn Youngkin or someone like that. I thought that would have been a home run. But as I listened to J.D. Vance last night, I became more comfortable with it just because I believe that story will resonate where it needs to resonate. And he had a very funny moment early in his speech when he's talking about Ohio, where, of course, he's from. And, they're kind of doing the Ohio chant. And then he's like, all right, cool it down, guys. We got to win Michigan, too. And I was like, it's pretty good. That was off the cuff. I know his old Buckeyes coming out in him, but you got to win the Wolverines as well.
Yeah, that connected with the millennials. He's like, chill, guys, chill.
Yeah. Yes. It was almost a handing off of the torch in many respects to a younger generation. Boomers don't talk like that. I mean, and if they do, it's like, all right, Pops, come on. Easy does it now. So you saw that next generation, and it came through in the way of J.D. Vance. And it came through in a much more populist tone than where the party was 10 years ago. And I know, and I've talked to many, more traditional conservatives, and I'm someone who kind of, I think, tries to blend all factions of the party together. And I don't do it, perfectly. Nobody does. But I see where the party is. I see where it's been. I think there's good in that. I think there's some bad in that, and we have talked a lot about it this week. But if you want to be a Big Ten party, this is what you have to work through. You can be a perfect ideological party and accomplish nothing. Ask the Libertarian Party about that. They're ideologically pure, and they're a bunch of losers. For most of my adult life, we've heard Republicans talk about, gosh, we got to broaden the tent. We got to be a Big Ten party. Well, I'm seeing that unfold here this week, where you still have traditional conservatives of, the Reagan era. You have, the old guard Bush-Romney Republicans. You have, obviously, the MAGA Trump Republicans. And everyone's kind of got their gripe, right? Everyone's like, I wish this was a little different. I wish that was a little different. And I understand all that. But this is part of being a Big Ten party. And what you hope is that all these factions come together and they create a great vision for the future of, their party, but more so America. It's a good problem to have, where nobody's totally happy. And right now the torchbearers, obviously, are, the folks inside of Donald Trump's movement, the MAGA folks. But, I don't think he's totally shunned Reagan conservatives. I don't think he's done that at all. I think Donald Trump would say he's got a lot of similarities with Ronald Reagan. He's just got a populist strain to him that's very clear and was very evident in J.D. Vance's speech last night. And that's where all this is heading. And as long as people have a seat at the table, so to speak, the old cliche, it's going to be good for the party over the long haul because you're broadening that tent. And that's exactly what you want to be doing right now, along with making people just feel good. And all week long, I can't think of an RNC in my lifetime, at least, since I've been covering this, where you had this level of emotion and you had this kind of overwhelming positive feeling about where things are as a party and where things are going for the party and then hopefully the country thereafter. I haven't seen something like it. Very different. Obviously, 2020 was mid-COVID, so it wasn't really a thing. And even 2016, very different, going all the way back to 12 and 2008, and there I'm back. 913-408-7957. Now, other huge news yesterday, of course, is Joe Biden ends up with COVID. And the media reaction to it has been unbelievable. Jay Ashcroft is going to be here at the bottom of the hour. He was at the RNC last night. He watched the J.D. Vance speech. We'll get his reaction, of course, the Missouri Secretary of State and gubernatorial candidate at the bottom of the hour, busy 6 a.m. hour on 95.7 FM KCMO. So as good as this week and yesterday in particular was for the Republican Party at the RNC, and by the way, the ratings continue to skyrocket. Easily 15 million people watching night 2 of the RNC. We have not gotten the numbers from last night, but it was pushing 20 million for night 1. It was right around 15 million Americans watching the RNC for night 2 on Tuesday. And I imagine those numbers will tick back up for J.D. Vance. And then tonight with Donald Trump, which will air right here on KCMO 95.7, I guarantee you it will be well north of 20 million people. I don't want to predict a number, but I'll throw it out there. 25 to 30. That's my best guess for what you'll see tonight for that Trump speech. The first time he will have spoken publicly, of course, since the near assassination on Saturday. But as good as yesterday was for the Republican Party, it was really that bad for the Democratic Party. So now what is happening is Joe Biden's got COVID, right? But that wasn't even like the biggest story. I mean, that was the biggest story of the day, but it was just part of what was a, string of bad stories for Joe Biden. So a couple of things happened yesterday. First off, Joe Biden says in a pre-taped BET interview that he would step down and step out of the presidential race if a doctor diagnosed him with a medical condition, his words. That report broke, 3, 4 in the afternoon. Then, a couple hours later, boom, guy's got COVID. And then throughout the day, leaks are coming out saying that, Chuck Schumer wants Joe Biden to step down. Why is that happening, by the way? That got leaked by people who wanted it to get leaked because clearly it didn't work. Chuck Schumer and Hakeem Jeffries tell Biden directly they have deep concerns about the election. This from Politico. The 2 top congressional Democrats have both met privately with the president in the last week. Telling you what, that wasn't leaked by Joe Biden's team, right? That was leaked by Chuck Schumer and Hakeem Jeffries' team. Nancy Pelosi apparently has done the same thing. They are leaking this for a reason, because what they're doing is not working. They're trying to get Joe out the nice way, and it's not working. So now they have to use their allies in the media and build a public pressure campaign to get him the heck out of there. So that's what's going on right now. That's why this is happening, because they can't get him to go. So you have Republicans unifying, coming together. Democrats are infighting, trying to get Biden off the ticket, and he's not willing to go anywhere. And then it turns out he's got COVID. So who knows when you're going to see the guy next? I mean, God willing, he's got a smooth and fast recovery. Thank goodness, COVID is obviously not what it was 4 years ago at this point for an 81-year-old. But either way, we wish Joe Biden a smooth recovery and hope he gets back on the, on the horse, so to speak, pretty soon, John.
I know. COVID's not what it was, but what else really is?
That's true, man.
Nothing is.
The age-old saying. What else is?
The maskless kind, right? He doesn't need a mask.
Yeah, that's true. I wonder if he'll put a hole in his mask for his nose so he can still sniff things properly. I don't know. But anyway, what did the media do last night with this information? I mean, it's been a brutal week for him on so many levels. Well, here was MSNBC last night. Joy Reid making the most stunning comparison or analogy, whatever you want to call this thing, between Donald Trump getting shot and Joe Biden hopefully recovering from COVID. I kid you not, this is a real clip.
Here's the question that I have on that. These 2 men are both elderly. Donald Trump is an elderly man who, for whatever reason, was given 9 seconds to take a iconic photo op during an active shooter situation. Weird situation. We'll figure that out one day. But his survival of that and bouncing right back and going right to his convention is being conveyed in the media world as a sign of strength. This current president of the United States is 81 years old and has COVID. Should he be fine in a couple of days, doesn't that convey exactly the same thing? That he's strong enough, older than Trump, to have gotten something that used to really be fatal to people his age. So if he does fine out of it and comes back and is able to do rallies, isn't that exactly the same?
It
I mean, it's not exactly the same. It's not the same incident, but it's an elderly man coming through out of an illness.
It should.
Yep, Trump getting shot in the head is the exact same as Joe recovering from COVID-19 in 2024, John.
Dude, I shake my head and I want to use the initials FFS.
Yes.
You know, a guy died. And this crap about, it's a photo op, we'll figure it out someday.
I know.
Is ridiculous.
Yeah.
It's shameful.
It is. Trump had 9 seconds, she says, somehow he had 9 seconds for an iconic photo op. No, he demanded to get up on that stage, put his shoes on, by the way, and at least show his people that he was alive. I don't think MSNBC and the honchos at Comcast did a good enough job taking enough people off the air. It was widely reported, as you well know, that Morning Joe didn't get to go on the air on Monday because, frankly, the bosses at Comcast didn't trust him to go on the air after Donald Trump was nearly assassinated. Well, apparently they skipped Joy Reid. And now she goes on TV last night and compares Donald Trump recovering from being shot in the head, nearly assassinated, to Joe getting over a cold. That's what we're talking about here. That's really what we're talking about here.
She's a real beauty.
I mean, COVID for an 81-year-old, yes, I mean, we know, of course, it can be bad, although I don't know anyone who's still testing themselves for it, but I get it. You've got an 81-year-old president. If he's not feeling well, you kind of go through all the tests, you make sure he's okay, and of course, we want Joe to fully recover here, as every decent American should. But they're not comparable. Stop. They are not comparable. And that is somebody who is desperate, who is grasping at straws, who is just looking for some angle to make her feel better about herself and about, in her idea, her party's situation. But that is as terrible and pathetic of an analogy as you are going to hear. But it also tells you a lot about, where things stand right now party-wide and how I think, for the most part, they've got themselves in total and utter chaos. We are almost exactly 3 years removed from August 26th of 2021 when 13 American military members were killed outside of an airport in Kabul, Afghanistan. And, of course, what was one of the more embarrassing moments for the United States on the world stage in modern American history. This withdrawal from Afghanistan that summer was an utter debacle, and it resulted in 13 of our own losing their lives. And, of course, that included one young man from right here in Missouri. We now know the names, and we've known them and tried to never forget them. And that includes Jared Schmitz out of St. Charles, Missouri, a rifleman. His awards and decorations include the National Defense Service Medal and Global War on Terrorism Service Medal. And he was one of those 13 who was killed that day in August of 2021. And last night, in a week that has had quite a bit of emotion attached to it in Milwaukee at the RNC, just because of what happened on Saturday, the most powerful moment may have come last night when two of the parents of one of the young men who died that day nearly 3 years ago took to the podium and read the 13 names of those who lost their lives that day nearly 3 years ago. These parents, Herman and Alicia Lopez, their son from California, was also a rifleman, Hunter Lopez, 22 years old. They took to the stage last night. I want to say it was about 8:30, and I want to play some of this because to me it was as powerful as anything, and the connection with the crowd was absolutely tremendous.
When Hunter and the other service members' bodies were returned to the U.S. in Dover, Delaware, Joe Biden met the plane. But he made the occasion more about his son, lost to cancer, than our sons and daughters, lost on his watch. Worse than that, he has never said their names out loud. And during last month's debate, he claimed no service members have died during his administration. None. that hurt us all deeply. So Alicia and I are here to say the names of all 13 service members who lost their lives at Abbey Gate. David Espinoza. Nicole G. Taylor Hoover. Ryan C. Knaus. Riley McCollum. Dylan Marola. Kareem Nakui. Dagan Page. Johanny Pichardo. Humberto Sanchez. Jared Schmitz. Maxton Sobiak. And my son, Hunter Lopez.
You can hear it there, and the second to last name was Jared Schmitz, the 20-year-old from St. Charles who lost his life almost 3 years ago now outside of the Kabul airport in Afghanistan. You can hear the crowd as the parents of Hunter Lopez are reading those 13 names start in unison, organically chanting back the name after Herman and Alicia Lopez read those 13 names in a row. And that wasn't planned. That wasn't, anything other than just an organic chant that began as those names began to be read. And even ABC, I'm flipping around last night between all the TV stations, kind of seeing what they're doing, what they're covering, how they're reacting, what they're saying. And this stood out to me last night from ABC News' Terry Moran as he described covering that moment, being there in the convention in Milwaukee as those names are being read.
David, I'm not sure I've ever experienced anything like that at a convention. The connection between this crowd and those family members of the fallen was just absolutely extraordinary. The emotions, the call and response that the crowd started spontaneously. Never forget reciting and repeating the names as they were read out. And it wasn't just the compassion and the sorrow that linked the crowd and those speakers. It was the anger. I've been out here this afternoon talking to veterans, Vietnam-era veterans, Iraq and Afghanistan veterans, about the campaign in general. And without being prompted, they bring up Afghanistan and the sense of shame and anger that they felt for the country and in this campaign.
That's when things started to turn. You go back to that moment, August of 2021, August 26th was the day that it took place. And that's when it feels like things started to turn. If history, I think, tells the story properly, that is when things began to go south for the current president of the United States. The first 6-7 months of 2021, inflation hadn't really kicked in yet. It was starting to build to 3, 4, 5%, but it really hadn't kicked in. There was still the sugar high, the sugar rush that people were on economically from all that stimulus money throughout 2020 and then all the way through early 2021. Remember, you had the Inflation Reduction Act in, I think it was April of 21. So people were still living high in the hog. Inflation wasn't really kicked in. But then you go back to the withdrawal in Afghanistan, the way that unfolded, the death of 13 service members. You roll that through as inflation starts to pick up steam. Then early 22, the war in Ukraine begins. That then is followed by skyrocketing inflation. It peaks in June of 22 at almost 9%. And obviously, things have not been the same since then over the last 2 years on multiple fronts, whether it's domestically or foreign policy-wise. But that moment there is when I believe we'll look back to and say that is when, for Joe Biden, and not only the way the withdrawal happened, but the follow-up from it. You heard the family say right there, Herman and Alicia Lopez, that they felt no empathy from the president of the United States. They said it in their comments that he talked more about his son who died from cancer than their own children who died due to incompetency from, in part, you can't put it directly on him, but in part, you're the commander-in-chief, right? I mean, you're the one in charge. And just like this deal with the Secret Service, nobody ever lost their jobs. Lloyd Austin, Secretary of Defense, nobody ever lost their job from that deal. Nobody resigned from that tragedy because it feels in part like there are no consequences for when you massively screw up. That's why a part of me is like, I love Bill O'Reilly. He was on the show on Monday. He's like, the Secret Service director is gone. I'm like, why? Based on what? Nobody's ever resigned from this administration out of shame. Why would she start? Now, speaking of Lloyd Austin, he got a shout out last night, Secretary of Defense, but not in the way that you think. He was just called the black guy. Oh, yeah. You hear this? You do not want to miss it.
Missed that.
Oh, well, hang tight, John. I got it for you next, brother. We'll get to it here on KCMO 95.7 FM. Well, Bill O'Reilly just now talking about his hit with Jon Stewart. I watched it last night. It's already racked up a couple million views. It is well worth your time. And he is so right about the fact that one thing we need to do more of is talk to people that we disagree with in this political climate. Heck, we've got Quentin Lucas coming up here in just over 10 minutes. And listen, when it comes to especially some of the big issues, politically and nationally, there is plenty that we disagree on. Plenty. But the two of us have been doing that weekly chat for the better part of 4 years now, 4.5, I guess, at this point. He's been on the show for 6 years, on and off. And I believe those conversations are important. Now, I get it. Some of you hate them, and that's your prerogative. But O'Reilly and Stewart last night, if you haven't seen it, let me just play a little bit of that because, first off, it was very funny. Jon Stewart's politics are nutty, but, man, that guy is fast. He is quick on his feet. Here's just a little bit of O'Reilly and Stewart from The Daily Show.
But we're now in a society where hatred is rewarded.
It's incentivized. It's monetized.
That's right. And the hate brigade is now pulling back a little bit because they have to, but they're going to be back in 2 weeks because they get paid to do this. They're so untalented. And you and I. Oh boy. I want to make this point because Stewart and I have a history. All right, we go back. But if you Google, all right,
really,
Stewart and I.
Ships passing in a night.
Right.
It's really.
We are able to disagree without hating each other. Now, I truly hate him, but I don't show it.
You hold it very well.
I don't put it out.
No, absolutely.
But now. That's not rewarded. That kind of détente where two people look at life differently isn't rewarded. The haters get the big money. And so that's what you have. And I think all Americans start to hold the corporations accountable. You can't do anything about the guys in the basement that are chucking this stuff out and you just had it on, these conspiratorial nuts. You can't do anything about that. But you can say to corporations, you better knock this stuff off.
That was Bill O'Reilly, part of his conversation with Jon Stewart. And he's so right. It's a very good 12 minutes. Now, don't bail on us right now here on KCMO. I'm saying, later in the day, check it out on YouTube or wherever you want to see it. But it's racked up a couple million views, and I miss those conversations. You don't get them anywhere anymore on cable news. You don't really get them anywhere in any media climate. I mean, on a very local level, we're probably the only ones doing it here with Quentin Lucas. But I can't think of anybody else like on the other side having conversations like that, and they're important to have. It's important to know what other people are thinking, how they're thinking. Not that you should agree with them, but like civil discourse is positive. It's a good thing. You're not compromising your values by having civil discourse with individuals. And O'Reilly and Stewart put on a masterclass of that on The Daily Show this week. And it was very funny. And Stewart, like I said, he is very good and he is really funny. So make sure you check that out. And I'll be actually visiting with our friend Bill O'Reilly this weekend. So I will tell him that all of you said hello, especially John and Mark, when they talk to him behind the scenes before he comes on the air. And he's a little gruff Bill. And then he comes on and he loves us here on KCMO. Now, before we get to the mayor of Kansas City, I just mentioned this before the break, but Michael Austin, Secretary of Defense, Joe Biden brought his name up in a conversation that was pre-recorded for BET, that is Black Entertainment Television. He goes on there and he's talking about Lloyd Austin. He's talking about his track record, and he kind of blanked on Lloyd Austin, so he called him, the black man.
And so it's all about treating people with dignity. And it's about making sure that, look, for example, look at the heat I'm getting because I named the Secretary of Defense, the black man. I named Ketanji Brown. Because of the people I've named.
The heat you're taking because you named a black guy Secretary of Defense? What are you talking about? I find me the person who criticized Lloyd Austin because of his skin color. Now, there's plenty of criticism for Lloyd Austin because of the job that he's done, because he should have been the guy to resign after the debacle in Afghanistan, but not because of his skin color, not because he's a black guy, because a lot of people think he's been incompetent in the job. And then, he's talking about, of course, Ketanji Brown Jackson, the first black female on the Supreme Court, who, yes, was routinely criticized for her nomination because of, some of her past history, but not because she was a black woman. The gaslighting on this stuff is so disingenuous. And when all you've got is the ability to play the race card and break it out and say, see all these things I do for black people, and gosh, people criticize them because they're black. No, they don't. Stop gaslighting the American people on this stuff. But when you've got nothing to point to, policy-wise, this is what you do. You said the people that have criticized you or criticized some of your appointments are just basically racist. That's the insinuation. But good thing he's turning down the temperature in the room, 4 days after calling for that from the Oval Office. The people who have criticized my appointments are racist. Come on, man. What are you doing?
Come on, man.
You got to be kidding me. Well, I get it. All the national attention this week in terms of events are in Milwaukee, where, of course, the RNC is taking place. But here in Kansas City, they are kicking off an outstanding weekend downtown at the Marriott, and it's through the Children's Miracle Network Hospital's National Champions Weekend. And, of course, they're a close partner of ours. We do our annual fundraiser right before Christmas here on KCMO 95.7 FM and within the Cumulus Media family. And the president of Children's Miracle Network Hospitals is Amy Daly. She joins us on KCMO. Amy, welcome to Kansas City. I understand you're now 9 months into the job. How's it been going?
Correct. Yes. 9 months in. I started as the president and CEO on November 1st, and it has been an absolute honor, an incredible organization that's doing amazing work all across the United States and Canada. And we're thrilled to be here in Kansas City this week.
Well, what about, your passion for CMN? What does that stem from for you?
Well, for me, just like a lot of people all around the world, it's personal. I have two children. They are now 26 and 28 years old, McAllister and Caden, and they're quite happy and quite healthy, but both of them were born at just over 30 weeks of gestation, so 2.5 months early. And both of them spent the first several months of their life in one of the neonatal intensive care units at a hospital, one of our member hospitals in Springfield, Illinois. And as a parent, as a new mom, and then a second-time mom just a few years later, I went through it. I went through the late-night phone calls to tell me that I needed to get in there because, they might not make it through the night. I went through the procedures and the tests and the diagnoses and all of the scary things. And I had these incredible people inside of the healthcare system that walked alongside me and my family to help us get through that. And I'm proud to say that, there's 12 million of those stories a year happening at our hospitals across the U.S. and Canada. So for me, it's personal, and I don't lose sight of that every day as I work, alongside the teams to help raise money for children's health care.
Amy, what do you guys have going on in Kansas City this week?
Oh, it is absolutely incredible. So we're here in downtown Kansas City. We're at the Marriott, and it is there's a lot of energy around here. So what's happening is we are having our National Leadership Conference, and that is for two of our big programs within the Children's Miracle Network Hospitals brand. One of those is our Dance Marathon, which is where we have colleges and universities and high schools all across the U.S. and we're bringing together the leaders of those programs who help raise money. Over $350 million has been raised by college students dancing over the years since we started that program. And then we're bringing together with them our other peer-to-peer fundraising program, which is Extra Life. And this is gamers. These are people who play video games and raise money at the same time. And we're actually having a gaming tournament here this week in addition to their leadership conference. So we've got about 750 individuals, fundraisers coming in from all over the country this week to learn how they can improve their fundraising, but also to come together around the mission and why we're here. And we've got a number of our what we call champions, which is our patients who are coming in from across the country to share their stories as well.
Is this an annual event that rotates through different cities every summer, or is it always in Kansas City?
Yeah, that's a great question. It does rotate, and in years past, we did these programs separately. So we had a conference just for our Dance Marathon leaders, and then we had one just for our Extra Life gamers. This is the first year that we've brought the two of them together into one conference because there's so many similarities in their peer-to-peer fundraising. And so, yeah, it rotates through different cities, and there's a number of reasons that we chose Kansas City. Obviously, your talk radio show and KCMO has always, been a great supporter of KU Medical Center with your radiothon, as you mentioned. And then we've got a really great base of extra lifers, of gamers in this community. You've got one particular individual who raised $87,000 last year through his gaming, but we've got 20 different Kansas City folks who are participating in our gaming tournament, and it's a great city. People are excited to come here. When we announced this location, it really got a lot of energy, and we're looking forward to a great time between now and Sunday.
Well, I hope Kansas City treats you well. You got incredible summer weather here in Kansas City. Trust me, it's not normally 85 with low humidity in late July. So you lucked out there.
Yeah, we do love that.
Yes, enjoy that. And this gamer, $87,000. This I assume young man raised.
Mm-hmm, yeah,
wow.
Isn't that absolutely incredible? And that's what we see, and we're so fortunate. Our Extra Life program started all from one child, a young girl named Victoria Enman. And Victoria had an acute lymphoblastic leukemia years ago in 2008. And one of a radio DJ actually started Extra Life. We refer to him as Doc. His name is Jeremy, but he started that program specifically for Victoria, and then it became part of the Children's Miracle Network. We've raised over $130 million around that since 2008, and I'm really honored to say that Joellen and Victor, who are Victoria's parents, are here with us this week at the event so that they can see their daughter's legacy live on here at the Ignite Conference.
Well, we're glad you're here in Kansas City. Amy Daly, the president and CEO of Children's Miracle Network, thank you for sharing your story. Enjoy your time in town, and if you need some, barbecue joint recommendations, you can ask our. I mean, I would tell you on air, but I don't want to show preferential treatment. So talk to Amy, Jill, Mitch
we
Baker.
don't want you to get in trouble.
Yes, you talk to all our good friends behind the scenes; they'll take care of you.
I will. Well, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me on, and thank you for the support of your station. You know, we've got 450 radiothons around the country, and it's a huge part of the way that we raise money. So thank you for everything that you've done as well.
You bet. Thank you so much, Amy Daly, the president and CEO, doing great work there with Children's Miracle Network. Last year, raising a ton of money. That's when we gave away the luncheon with the signed Bill O'Reilly books to our top 10 donors, and then we took them out to Jasper's. So that was, I mean, we're over halfway there. It's coming up early December. It's right around the corner. I'm going to see our good pal Bill O'Reilly this weekend. I'll maybe ask him to double down on some books. He's got that Confronting the President's book coming out in September. So maybe that'll be next up. We'll see. If you didn't see, speaking of O'Reilly, he was on with Jon Stewart last night on The Daily Show, and it was hysterical. I mean, that's the kind of stuff. You want to talk about bringing people together in this country. Not that everyone's going to see the world the same way, but at least going back to a place where you can talk to people that you disagree with and have like normal conversations with them about it. We've lost it. And O'Reilly talked about it this morning at 7:15. He does the O'Reilly Morning Update here on KCMO. And he talked about going on Stewart's show, and it came about because of the near assassination of Donald Trump. Remember, they used to go on each other's shows all the time, 10 plus years ago. And it was hysterical. And by the way, it was very funny this week. Stewart's kind of nutty, but man, that guy is fast. He doesn't miss a beat. Like, I know that none of that stuff is pre-scripted because he doesn't know what Bill's going to say, but you would think that they script these things out with how funny Stewart is with some of his comebacks. And that's the stuff, when you talk about what we need more of in this country right now, it's Jon Stewart, Bill O'Reilly, conversations like that happening, and we try to have as many as we can here on KCMO. And we know, of course, what the conversation is today. What's happening tonight? You will have Donald Trump addressing the nation for the first time since that near assassination, capping off the RNC. It will air here on KCMO Talk Radio. That coverage will begin at 8 p.m. 913-408-7957.